Välkommen och god dag allesammans. Welcome back to the channel where we use the actual historical sources to speak about Norse pagan beliefs and tradition. And today we are talking about Halloween. So this is a pagan holiday originally and was celebrated by the Celts, and that was called Samhain, like you see here, as most of you have probably heard of. But as usual, if the Celtic pagans had a holiday here, the Norse pagans probably had a very similar one, and in this video we're going to talk about how the Norse would have celebrated Samhain. So I'm not going to talk so much about what Samhain is. It's very interesting, and we have a lot of records of this Celtic holiday, and there are a bunch of other YouTube channels out there that give a good description of Samhain. So I'm just going to focus on the Norse one because we really don't know a lot about it. Like the Celts do, but there are quite a few things that we do know that we can use to come to some conclusions. So first of all, we have the name. Now, we don't really know what the Norse actually called this day, but some reconstructionists have called it Halogiaptan, like you see here. That's just a theory, but I like that name. It's some people call it Vetrnaetr, like winter nights that some of you may have heard of, and that's not right actually. Vetrnaetr is a couple of different blots. It's not one day. One of them is Alpha Blot, which perhaps took place on what we know as Halloween, but yeah, we just don't know for sure. So no name there. But the second and really the most important thing was that this day was the New Year. The Norse only had two seasons, summer and winter. And Halloween, or some day around late October in our modern day calendar, was the last day of the year in the Norse pagan world. So in the most common calendar that most of you have maybe seen here, the month is called Ylr, or Vetrnaetr, which meant frost month basically, and this was the time that the last things were harvested and the animals were slaughtered and the frost came. So here's a couple things that we have actual records of that the Norse did in medieval times and later on. So first, we do know from folk tradition, up until just a couple hundred years ago actually, that collecting mistletoe was done at this time. In Sweden, they would throw rocks up at the mistletoe to bring it down. The Celts did the same thing, where the Celtic druids did it by cutting it down with some gold or other valuable metals. Second thing we have records of is, again, all the way up until pretty recent times in Scandinavia, there are bonfires lit on Halloween night, and the Celts also did this. So at this bonfire, people partied and offerings were given, offerings of food or drink or something like that, with basically just the blot. It's also documented that in folk tradition, it was the children who walked around the village and collected these offerings from the people that were supposed to be offered at the bonfire. And this is what many think is alpha blot, which I'll do another video on. But this is probably a tradition that goes back thousands and thousands of years from the looks of it, and people think that this is the origin of trick-or-treating. So this was a pagan tradition originally, but when Christianity came in, this was not allowed anymore. Just doing a blot, just leaving food outside at a burial mound or a bonfire anywhere, that was illegal. We see in many places in Scandinavia, we see that in law books. However, people wanted to keep this pagan tradition alive, and they still did this offering up until a couple hundred years ago. So it's believed that the kids had to put on costumes in Christian times in order to disguise themselves. We could walk around freely in pagan times, but when Christianity came in, the kids had to wear costumes or masks to conceal their identity. Not sure, that's just a theory, but it does make some sense. Another thing that we have record of is there was some activity around the burial mounds at this time, but the records are very mysterious and vague. There are a lot of theories that experts have about this, but I will go into that in another video. Another thing that we have records of is that people probably practiced Utiseta at this time, a ritual where you would go sit out all night at the burial mound to gain knowledge and wisdom and a sight into the realm of the dead. And we're pretty sure about this because At New Year's in more modern times, so the first day of January, the practice of Aarsgang was done in Scandinavian folk tradition. And Aarsgang was pretty much exactly the same thing as Utiseta. You would go out in the middle of the night in order to gain prophecies and wisdom and contact with the dead, maybe. The pagan practice of Utiseta was just sitting there still, but that became actually illegal in the 1200s. You could not go outside and sit still in the middle of the night, so that turned into Aarsgang. And don't forget, when Christianity came in, the New Year became January, but the pagan New Year, it was Halloween, so many people probably also sat at the burial mounds in pagan times, and they did Aarsgang in more modern times. Watch my video about Utiseta and Aarsgang, that is in the link in the description. Now, the most important parts we think about Halloween is not the actual Halloween day itself, but 9 days after, and this was called Vetrnaetr, or the Night of the Bear. So this day is marked on the Primstav, which is one of the most reliable calendars that we have from old times. Now, what was believed to happen here is that they have their parties and festivities on Halloween night, and then after that, a band of warriors or hunters would go out into the wild on a hunt for 9 nights until Vetrnaetr. They would go out on a hunt for the winter spirits, and then the winter spirits were represented as wolves and bears in Scandinavia. They would be boars in the Celtic world, or cave lions in ancient Greece, all of that. So this is what many people believe is the wild hunt. And this is also, by the way, how you could become a berserker. When you kill that animal and wear the pelt, you take their spirit and some of their ferocity you can use in battle. One of the most famous legends in all European history is that Odin's wild hunt that I just mentioned. And most of you have probably heard of it, so I won't talk about it all in this video, but really quickly, for those who haven't heard of it, it's a very mysterious legend and told slightly different ways in folk legends all over Europe. But basically, they all tell of a band of wild warriors going out on a hunt around the New Year's, causing chaos wherever they went. So of course, in more modern times, this was the first days of January that these legends were said to have happened. But don't forget, the Norse pagan calendar, the New Year was at Halloween. So many people believe that this hunt was done at Halloween to kill the winter spirits, the wolves and bears, so that the winter would be killed and summer would come back to life. This is represented by the story of Hoder killing Balder that we all know, and then Vali kills Hoder to avenge Balder. So watch my video about that. Those links are in the description below. And that's about it. That's mainly what we know about the Norse Halloween and how it was celebrated. Like I said, we don't know a whole lot, but we do know a lot more about the Celtic Samhain. It included feasts, divination, bonfires, the offering to the Celtic sea god Shoni, by wading out into the ocean and giving an offering. We do know that plays and performances happened, and trick-or-treating. Also playing pranks on people was very popular in the Celtic Samhain. And of course, the whole idea around this day that the Aos Sea, or the spirits of the dead, were more accessible. So at this time of the years when the spirits could much easier pass into our realm, so it's easier for us to contact them. And of course, this is a belief that is shown all over the world in lots of different cultures. So we can pretty much assume that the Norse pagans had very similar traditions to the Celts. Unfortunately, we don't have as good records of holidays in the Norse world as the Celtic pagans have. But the 100% coolest thing about all this comparative stuff is that we have a lot of records about the Celtic pagan holidays, but not a lot of records about their myths and religious beliefs. For the Norse, it's the opposite. We don't have a lot of records about the Norse holidays and traditions, but we have tons of records of Norse pagan myths. So our two religions can work together to recreate things and fill in the missing parts. We were really not that different at all at a certain time. We are brothers in the same Indo-European family. So I hope you liked this video. Let me know if any of you guys have any input about Samhain. or any other pagan Halloween traditions around the world. I would love to learn about all that so we can compare knowledge and develop the best theories to fill in the missing parts. That's about it for this video. Vi ses nästa gång.